Let's go ahead. You know, it's funny because I do have one more comment on that, talking about the myth of the week, just so everybody knows. In 2026, they passed unanimously. They tell you the outlet can't be reconditioned.
That's funny.
So, you know, that goes back to what I was saying. If it's at the AC unit, you know, if I could recondition it, I mean, that's a listed unit. How are you going to recondition that? I mean, just okay.
It makes you wonder. That one's funny though. The other one that's funny is when you said it can't be an outlet until a cord's plugged into it. That was a good one too.
See, they're twisting my words. What I actually said there, and I said, what? Because it had to deal with the switch that was going over. Then I said like a receptacle that you cord and plug connect into. When I was saying it was hardwired, I said you had to have a box out there that's the outlet or the hardwire. I said it's not inside the equipment because you know, the code, you know, the manufacturer has to take the NEC into consideration, and they don't make it weatherproof. You know why? Because it's not an outlet. You know, and see, that's where my argument always comes in. If they have to follow the code, which is required by 1910.7B2, you go look at it in OSHA. They tell you they have to follow the national codes. If they look at the national code and they did not make that supposedly outlet that's inside the AC unit, why isn't it weatherproof?
Well, and I'll take it one step further. If you look at the manufacturer instructions from Tesla, and it says no GFCI protection is required when hardwired, where does that say? Outdoors, indoors, in garages, in accessory buildings, in boat yards, marinas? Where does that say anywhere? It doesn't.
Well, Code Making Pound 1, y'all about to get a rebuttal, and I'm putting in there. I'm going to submit a comment that says the National Electrical Code overrides the manufacturer's instructions. Watch, they'll reject it. You know why they're going to reject it? Because they already comply with the National Electrical Code.
True.
So, all right, let's get topic week. That's great discussion tonight. I actually enjoyed that a lot. All right.
I did too.
Now, this one, this is just like we looked at in 501.3, and where we were dealing with class 1, div 1, div 2, and they got into where you get into your dust and fibers and flying stuff here, and I'm sorry, they're dust, the fire flying 503. But when you get in, you looking at this, they did the exact same thing here and talking about reconditioned equipment, and they got very specific. And you'll notice they tell you it's permitted to be installed. You can recondition this equipment, okay? But if you do it, it has to be in accordance with what? The manufacturer's instructions, which if there are no instructions provided, then you have to go through a NERL, okay?
Right.
Now, how many times I said, now let me ask, and I'll ask this question to people that are watching. If I have to go in and have a nationally recognized standard that's set up for this, which would be they'd set up through a UL 508 or 508 shop, do you think when they're looking at this and they're going to recondition this equipment, do you think they would have taken the National Electrical Code into consideration when they're designing that equipment?
Well, yeah, it's the supporting document, right?
That's right. And then they get in where they talk about dust ignition proof here and dealing with class 2 div 1 motors and also generators.
There could be a bunch of NFPA standards that they're taking into account.
Oh yeah, Matter of fact, I brought that up. We did one of the changes, and they were referring over to another standard you need to look at. Matter of fact, we'll have one in here in just a little bit. That when we get over to Article 517, you're gonna see a lot of change that comes in there. And I was trying to remember, I forget exactly which standard it is, but it's an NFPA standard. And
Nice.
then they come down, you got Prin 2 here where they talk about intrinsically safe equipment. And they talk about the replacement of printed circuit breaker, circuit board assemblies and modules with the like for the components provided the original manufacturer. Okay. So they're coming in and they're just telling you certain things here that they're going to allow for this, but you can go look at other articles and look at reconditioned equipment. You won't see all this listed here like this detail. And the reason that is because you're dealing with an area that's very hazardous.
True.
Okay. And that's why they look at, I'm not going to go through the committee statement. I already been through that. Then we looked at this in 501.130C. And the same thing, they got the luminaire retrofits again here. Okay.
Right.
And all they're telling you here is that these retrofits are required to be certified here. You got a certification that they're listed and labeled for what? A hazardous classified location. And in this case, you're dealing with class 2 locations. Okay. And
yeah, and I want to give a big shout out to all the people that do these retrofit kits. Y'all are doing a great job. Like the retrofit kits that I've gotten, they comply with the NEC. They comply with listing and labeling of the new fixtures, and they've been just such a breeze to install. So I want to give a big shout out. They've been doing a great job. Like they've been paying a lot of attention, and it makes it easier for us to install these out in these hazardous locations.
And that's good because they get in, they talk about the modification to these existing luminaires. And the great thing is they say, once again, it has to be done in accordance with what? The manufacturer's instructions that are provided with it.
Yeah.
Okay? Once again.
Dude, I'll tell you what, like some of these like lamps that we're installing for like signs and stuff, like all the measurements are done. It's perfect. It's like they have everything installed, everything provided with the kit. All you have to do is just screw it in. All the lamps fit, everything fits. You wire it the way they tell you on the manufacturer's instructions. You walk away, you're done. It's real simple.
And here's another proposed change for 2026. This here is where you're getting into your zone locations. Okay? And you look, they're doing the exact same thing here. Okay? Where they're talking about your reconditioned motors and generators. And they say it has to be, once again, in accordance with what? The manufacturer's instructions. Okay.
So has any of this changed, or is this just clarification?
Well, no, this is going to change if it stays the way it is for the second revision that's coming up.
Gotcha.
Okay. These are all the proposed ones that have passed at this point. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now this is the one where they're dealing with NFPA 99, and this was interesting because I've never really looked at NFPA 99 because I don't deal.
Isn't that healthcare?
Yeah, this is healthcare, Article 517, and what they're doing here is you've got risk categories and risk assessments that they're pulling out here for these patient care areas, and they come in and they tell you these risk categories, and there's 4 categories here, and they tell you what these 4 categories are. Okay. And as you go down through it and you start looking at it, they tell you in the informational note there that major injury can include any of the following. And this is through any amputation, loss of the side of the eye, whether temporary or permanent, chemical or hot metal burn to the eye, or any penetrating injury to eye. I mean, they just go through. They've got 7 items here they list that sets up based on these categories. Because if you look at these categories, they're almost exactly the same in wording. The only difference is you got to go over and look at NFPA 99 to tie this in. Then look at this. Then they come into the risk assessment here. Now, I
Okay.
find this interesting. Let me tell you why. Because if you go look at NFPA 70E, where you're doing electrical safety in the workplace, one of the things we always tell you to do is a risk assessment, don't we?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And what they tell you here in the risk assessment, it says the healthcare facilities governing body shall establish the processes and operation that are planned for the healthcare facility. Then they tell you the governing body shall conduct risk assessments and shall determine the risk categories based on the character of the processes and operations conducted in the healthcare facility, and risk categories shall be classified by the healthcare facilities governing body by following and documenting a defined risk assessment procedure. And then it
Right.
says, where required by the authority having jurisdiction, I'm gonna expand on this just a little bit. The risk assessment shall be provided to the authority having jurisdiction for review based on the character of the processes and operation conducted in the healthcare facility. Now, the reason I bring it up, it was probably been about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. We had a guy come in from the state when I was doing as a moderator over at UTA BPI, which is Building Professional Institute, and we used to have all of these the inspectors in Texas all over used to come this. We God, there'd be so many people that'd be there for all different types of construction. And we had this guy come in and he was going over the code and he actually showed the state of Texas where they differ from what the code says and had more stringent requirements. So when the reason we did the course is so when the inspectors were going out checking for a hospital or something, they would have guidance on what they were looking at. They actually gave checklists of the differences of what they required compared to what the National Electrical Code in NFPA 99 stated.
Wow.
So I
Okay.
will tell you to check with your state to know the difference in that. Now that all comes from experience,
Yeah.
and we built and I'll tell you how I know this is because we had a brand new hospital that went in Grapevine, Texas, and it was Baylor Healthcare and nice facility. And uh, I remember going out there and I was like, I think I heard Dad sometimes say something about that. So I called him and he said, yeah, you need to check with the state. And I called down the state and they got me in contact with a person. And he actually come down and met with me and went over the differences from what was on it. And we actually had to fix like 8 items that the state was more stringent on than what the engineer had given. And I had just started there and the plans review guy we had didn't know. So we
Wow.
had to have all those items brought up to state requirement. Isn't that something?
Okay.
So
Wow.
that's
Yeah.
how I've learned all this stuff.
Okay.
All right, now,
You're like that's how I got all these scars.
yeah, and now this one, uh, they come in and they just added here where you have other structures that are set here, and they tell you that where you have all these other structures, and they're saying that the chassis of these multiple relocatable structure sections shall be bonded together with a solid copper number 8 minimum insulated or bare bonding conductor with terminations in accordance with 250.8 and 250.12. So they're basically saying if you have more than two structures that you need to bond them all together. Okay. And
Okay.
then where you get in, you're dealing with agricultural stuff here. This is they come in, and I've always stated this. I've always thought this needed to be in there, but this is where they get into your equipotential plane construction, and they're telling you what they want you to do here. So you got structural reinforcing steel, and they tell you here where you have unencapsulated structural reinforcing steel that it's required to be bonded by steel tie wires or the equivalent or a copper grid. and it says if you're doing a copper grid, you have to meet these following requirements, and it has to be constructed of a minimum number 8 bare solid copper conductors, got to be bare, bonded to each other at all points of crossing in accordance with 250.8. That's your connection side. Then it says they are arranged in a 12 by 12 network of conductors in a uniformly spaced perpendicular grid pattern with a tolerance of 4 inches. Okay?
Nice. Yeah.
So I think this is good. They've been doing it this way for a long time. And if you really want to look at it, you can go over and also look at 555.14 and 682.33. It matches the same requirements that are required there. Okay.
Nice.
And then they added this dealing with your mobile homes in 550.32. And this is the service equipment. And they added this for where you have a replacement home. And it says when you have existing service equipment and it is reconnected to a replacement mobile or manufacturer home, the service is required at this point to be provided with surge protection device. That's in accordance with 230.67. And if you'll remember, we actually went over that a little bit, that they made some changes there in this cycle for the surge protection device.
Hey, so I got a question for you on
it.
that one.